there guys, it's PC Guy here, and I'm going to be going over AMD versus Intel as far as processor goes in 2019. Now, first of all, this is going to be one of those little talking videos where there's not much going on the screen, so I apologize if it's a bit boring, but feel free to tab out if you want to follow what I'm saying, and tab out, leave it running, and just go watch the memes or something, and well, you'll still be listening. In any case, the Intel versus AMD in processors has been going on for quite a few years, obviously. It has had its ups and downs, where one was better, the other one's worse. For the last period of time, Intel has been perceived as the top of the line, as the best of the best performance-wise, although that is not necessarily, oh, that is accurate, but it is not necessarily accurate at every level, obviously, especially in the last few years since the launch of their Zen architecture and then the Zen 1 or well, Zen 2 or Zen Plus, whatever you want to call it, architecture with the Ryzen 2000 series. It has become very close and performance-wise, but performance-wise is not the only thing I want to be talking about in this video, because there are a lot more aspects when choosing a CPU, and depending on the use you have for that CPU and the importance and how often you upgrade and the pricing, and does the pricing matter as much as performance, and all those sorts of things. Now, before we start, I would like to begin by saying that these videos are not sponsored, that I have not gotten for this video or any other videos any payment or review samples or anything or any sort of pressure from either of the companies. It's everything from own use or research or benchmarking or looking at other reviews. So this is purely my opinion, and it's not influenced by either of the two companies. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is about longevity. You are buying a CPU now, it's going to last you several years, hopefully, but I'm talking about longevity not only of the CPU, obviously, they all last about the same time roughly, depending on voltages and use and all that, but I'm talking about the longevity of the entire system, more specifically the core block that is motherboard, RAM, and CPU. Now, the thing with Intel is that, well, for this video, let's take as an assumption that they are better performance-wise, pure performance-wise, which they are if you are comparing, for example, 9900K versus 2700X. Intel is better. So let's take that as an example. 2700K runs on an AM4 socket, and AMD has already promised that the AM4 socket will be current, will be their supported socket until at least 2020. That is at least 2020, and it is already several years old. So that gives it a lot of lifetime for the socket. For if you say buy a CPU now, if you want to buy CPU end of next year, like for example the Zen 2 architecture that's coming soon, it will be supported. If you bought a CPU 2 years ago, it would still be an AM4 socket and it would still be supported in 2020. So that gives you a lot of breathing room that, unless your motherboard is low end, because obviously power requirements change and the higher motherboards have better power delivery, so a higher end motherboard will last you for the better CPUs that come out later, but that's a different story anyway. Your motherboard could theoretically fit a CPU from 2000. I'm being very roundabout about this. If you bought a motherboard 2 years ago with an AM4 socket from AMD, it could theoretically hold a CPU from 2020 from the Zen 2 family, for example. So there is a sort of value there that you don't have to replace the motherboard and possibly replace the RAM. Well, you will probably have to replace the RAM when DDR5 comes out, but that's a different story. So you won't have to replace the motherboard if you upgrade like that. Intel, on the other hand, and I apologize for this very long roundabout explanation. Intel, on the other hand, yeah, there is the 1151 socket that was used for, I believe, 7th gen already. And then there was the new 1151 socket that was used for 8th gen and is also used for 9th gen. But now there is going to be a new socket type already for the next family that has been announced. It's going to be a different socket again. So again, yeah, it's basically every family or every couple of years, Intel is throwing out a new socket, which means that we will need to buy a new motherboard. This obviously leads to extra costs, especially if you're on the higher end of the spectrum where motherboards are pricey. Then yeah, you will be in for a bit more of money loss if you go with Intel. Is the performance worth it? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your use case, which leads me to my next point. Use case. Intel is traditionally so far the king in clock frequency, in frequency per core. They have the highest frequencies at stock. They usually overclock further past those frequencies. So if you're going for pure single core or single thread frequency, Intel is the place to go for that. However, AMD has a way higher core count with hyperthreading enabled by default and overclocking enabled by default, even though AMD CPUs cannot be overclocked as good, and that's not because they're bad at overclocking, it's because they already are clocked very close to their limit by default, by stock factory settings, while Intel is clocked under their limit to, give people it's not to give people the ability to overclock, it's like to give a buffer for if like there's a bad CPU in there or not as good CPU in there, like Silicon Lottery, it happens. Then they won't have to deal with complaints. My CPU doesn't reach this and that frequency. So it's a bit of a buffer like that for the bad CPUs. Um, Intel also needs you to have Z series motherboards, for example, for overclocking, while every AMD motherboard can overclock. So that's extra money that you are throwing to have an Intel CPU. Now, as far as the clock speed versus more threads and more cores from AMD goes, if you are using applications that require a lot of that that use multiple cores more effectively, I kind of lost the term there. AMD is the place to go. That goes for example, high-end video editing, that sort of thing. AMD is the place to go for that. For gaming, Intel is usually more suited because games traditionally do not use multiple cores very efficiently. They are starting to be better at that now, so there is that to take in mind. But from a traditionally viewed stand of point of view, Intel is a bit more suited towards gaming, and I say a bit because that might change in the near future. So there is that use case that if you want pure single thread performance for example, gaming, Intel is a bit more suited. If you want other things that use multiple threads or multiple cores, AMD is a lot more suited because it has a lot more cores and everything has hyperthreading. While on Intel, on the latest family, only the very highest of ends has hyperthreading with 9900K, and the rest has no hyperthreading at all. So there's that to consider as well. Now, the second consideration is pricing. If you look at the top end of the product list, the 9900K is going right now for, at least here in the Netherlands, I just looked really quickly, it's going right now for around 520 euros, while the 2700X is going for less than 300. Now, you cannot really compare the products head to head because the 9900K is a better processor in most scenarios, but it would be more fair to compare it, for example, with the Threadripper series. The 2920X is a more suitable candidate to go head to head with 1900K. It costs just short of 600, so it's an 80 euro difference between the two, which is still sizable. And the Threadripper 2920X is slightly slower. If you go at the core per core, well, more than slightly, it has a boost clock of 4.3 GHz when not overclocked. So it's slower than the, I believe, 4.8 or 4.9 from the Intel's product. However, it does feature 12 core 24 threads as opposed to 8 core 16 threads from the 9900K. So there again comes the use case scenario of what is actually important to you. This was just trying to find a bit of a halfway comparable at the same price point comparison. So that is, how it goes at the end of the stack. At the middle of the stack and at budget levels, AMD usually takes the cake in terms of performance per price. Intel products have more raw performance, but if you are in a budget and you have to mind your money, you can get better for the same money on AMD side than on Intel side, at least as far as low and medium tier of products goes. So that is also a consideration you need to do when you are trying to decide what platform you go for your CPU. Now, the last point I kind of wanted to make is about the security. There have been a number of security flaws discovered in the past few months or past year or two, like Spectre, Meltdown, now recently Spoiler and Zombie. What was it called again? Zombie Lane? I don't remember anymore. I just read it for the tech news piece, but I already forgot. In any case, these are features that are prevalent in most Intel CPUs. Some of them are fixed, like the zombie thing. It's already fixed on an 8th and 9th generation, so nothing to worry about. Spectre Meltdown, not so much. But in any case, some of these exploits affect AMD as well, but not all. The majority affects Intel only. So there's also that to take in consideration, that the AMD processors are a bit more safe in terms of those vulnerabilities. What you also have to consider is that these exploits are kind of edge cases. It's not something that the average user needs to worry about right now because they are very difficult to pull off, and you need to be specifically targeted for some of them. So it's not really something that you necessarily have to worry about as an average user or gamer enthusiast. It's more of a more professional level thing. If you have like company secrets to keep or sensitive data to keep that people might be interested in stealing for whatever reason, then that might be something you have to worry about, but otherwise not really. In any case, it is a matter of consideration that you need to kind of think of if you are willing to view it from every angle available. So, where do we stand in all of this? I would like to remind before giving any conclusion, I know it has been looking throughout the video as if I am favoring AMD a little bit. Uh, I'll just say this video is not sponsored, not this video, not any other video, and I have never received products from either of those two companies to test or try or review, so I'm completely unbiased as far as being paid off to do this video goes. I personally use an Intel processor. I have a 9700K. My wife has a 9600K that we got just recently. I was going to wait for AMD, but her PC died and we could not wait because, well, her PC died. Yeah, I own and use mostly Intel products. That said, I believe that AMD has a better value for money proposition, and I believe that might be even more accentuated when the Zen 2 architecture comes out. So if you are going for good but budget conscious build, I would advise you to take a look at AMD stuff. If you are going for raw performance, right now I would tell you to go for Intel, although that will cost you further in the future when you want to upgrade again because of socket types and all that sort of stuff. I would also, if you are not wanting to upgrade right now, I would advise you to wait for the Zen 2 and see what comes out because it could actually be better than the Intel 9900K or whatever else you were going to buy. It might be better and cheaper. So I would advise you to wait for Zen 2 and see what comes out and just go from there and not buy right now unless you really have to, like if your PC dies, for example. So that is also something that you have to keep in mind when you are deciding to upgrade. That also kind of makes me want to do a video of when to upgrade, when to wait, which I probably will. It's probably going to be one of the last on my lists. I have a nice little list of stuff to do. This is actually benchmark information for another video. In any case, it's very high tech, I know. I think this kind of wraps up the video. Intel, AMD, it depends. If you're going for raw performance right now, Intel. If you are going for price versus performance on a budget level, go for AMD, I would say. Otherwise, if you don't have to upgrade now, wait, it's only going to be a couple of months until we hear more specific information and possibly even a release date for the Zen 2 architecture. So if you don't have to upgrade now, wait and see what happens, and maybe you'll get a better deal either from AMD's new products or from potentially Intel's products maybe dropping a bit in price to combat AMD's launches. So we'll see about that. This has been Attic PC Guy. Let me think what you guys opinions are on the whole Intel versus AMD thing. What do you use? What do you usually recommend your friends? Because you're probably usually the tech guy in your family if you're watching these videos. And yeah, tell me what you'll think about these videos. Like and subscribe if you like them and want to see more of them. And I will see you guys next time.